Good afternoon and welcome to the Resolve to be Ready 10 Steps to Preparedness webinar series. My name is Allison Albright and I'm the Regional Preparedness Liaison for FEMA Region 2. I'm going to provide a few technical considerations before we begin. Today's proceedings are being recorded and captioned. The archived event will be made available on the FEMA website in the coming weeks. You should hear audio through your computer speakers, so please ensure your volume is turned up so you may hear the proceedings accordingly. In the top right of the screen, we ask if you'd like to receive the news and updates from Region 2. If so, please enter your email address and we'll be sure to add you to the distribution list. We will have a question and answer session after the presentation concludes. You'll see a Q&A pod in the lower right-hand corner. Please feel free to submit your questions about the subject matter there, and time permitting, we'll do our best to answer them. Finally, the PowerPoint presentation from today will be available for you to download in the file share pod as a PDF. You can click on the file and download it using the download button. With that, I'd like to turn it over to the Region 2 Community Preparedness Officer to introduce our speaker and today's proceedings.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Debbie Costa, the Community Preparedness Officer for FEMA Region 2. I'd like to again welcome you to our Resolve to be Ready 10 Steps to Preparedness webinar series. FEMA individual and community preparedness programs from around the nation have come together as one FEMA to collaborate on a series of preparedness webinars for our stakeholders. Resolve to be Ready is focused on sharing emerging trends and resources from across the country. Each session will feature FEMA preparedness staff from the different regional offices, and we're pleased to be co-hosting today's webinar with the individual and community preparedness team from FEMA's Region 10 office, serving Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. This webinar will discuss how to create emergency communication hubs within your community. Guest speakers from the Seattle Emergency Communications Hubs will discuss what the hubs do, how they attract and train volunteers, and how they work to engage the whole community in those efforts. Our first speaker today, Cindy Barker, is a community activist and organizer. She first became interested in emergency response as a member of King County Search and Rescue in the mid-1990s. In West Seattle, she has worked on community preparedness after the Nisqually earthquake in 2001 and was a founding member of West Seattle Be Prepared, which established 7 emergency communication hub locations in West Seattle. In 2008, she banded with other like-minded community organizers to support each other in preparedness efforts across Seattle, and there are now over 150 hubs in multiple neighborhoods. She is retired from the Boeing company after 34 years and now gets to volunteer full-time instead, sometimes even travel. Ann Forrest grew up in Tornado County and served 20 years as a Navy nurse. With the nomad life finally over, the family chose Seattle to settle. Ann revitalized her neighborhood community council and established their emergency communications hub, where neighbors gather to help one another after a major disaster. Her involvement in all things disaster continues to grow. Currently, she helps coordinate the North Seattle hubs and teaches preparedness classes online to groups of all sizes. Her volunteer work consumes many hours of the day, rounded out by raising pups to be service dogs, gardening, and occasionally paying attention to her family. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Cindy to get us started.
Thank you very much. I liked Ann's introduction about, both of us are sort of overachievers on this hub discussion. I do want to point out to you that she's going to handle the questions for us, so if I'm going too fast or there's something you really want to get clarified before I move on, since we'll do question and answers at the very end, and we'll be watching the questions that come in. So please don't be afraid to type those in. And I do want to point out that the downloadable file that was provided for you is only 11 pages. It's the notes page for this presentation. There's a lot of pictures in here, and so I thought that might be helpful for people if you're able to just print it out, then you can take notes directly on it. So that should get us smoothly going into the presentation. So I'm looking at everybody signing in. What a diverse group. I enjoy seeing the CERT members. I enjoy seeing the emergency managers, because this is really a topic that I want to make sure I cover in context that you can use. For the emergency managers and the people who work with volunteer groups, take what you can out of this. I'm not promoting this as, this is the way to do it, but there are many concepts in here that we have taken from other groups across the nation and incorporated. So steal what you can, use what makes sense for your jurisdiction. And for all the CERT members, when we go through this, when you are out in the field and you're actually responding in a disaster, and my context is typically, we think about the big earthquake here in the Puget Sound area, think about what you can do to also help your community members who may have been gathering and are doing exactly what we do in the hubs, which is sharing information. If you're out in the field, you might be the first eyes for situation awareness for your chain of command, and so how can you connect and help the citizens as part of your response too? So that extra dimension to CERT is an interesting conversation to explore. So that's kind of my let's get started here. I should have practiced moving the... There we go. Sorry about that. I got 8 screens in front of me here trying to figure it out. So what we're going to cover today is just the basics of what are the Seattle hubs, what and why they operate. And then like we said, a big part of how you keep momentum going is how you keep your volunteers trained and engaged. And then also when we do outreach to the whole community, it's for 2 parts. One is just the basic preparedness message, but the other is to let people know about what the hubs are. Because when people want to respond in a disaster, it's good that they know where they can go to do that. In Seattle, we had a unique situation, which is predating the hubs. We had a program in Seattle called SNAP. And I knew I would get a phone call in the middle of this. And SNAP is very similar to other jurisdictions. It's called Map Your Neighborhood. It's the block level preparedness program. And so they taught classes for personal preparedness and then organizing at a block level. And then the next level of preparedness was up at the city, the city departments. And there was really nothing in the middle for community level. And after our Nisqually earthquake in 2001, our police precinct in here in West Seattle said, you community leaders are going to be really important should we have a real major earthquake, because we don't have the resources to get out to everyone with the information or to personally attend to everybody. And you community leaders know what your neighborhoods are like. You know who's vulnerable. You know who has...
So it sounds like Cindy accidentally dropped the line. I'm wondering if maybe Ann could jump in for a moment until we get Cindy back on the line.
Sure, be happy to. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Ann. And can somebody maybe give Cindy a call? Maybe she doesn't even realize she dropped.
Yeah, I'll work on that.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Okay, so simply put, a hub is a community gathering site that activates in the event a disaster occurs that makes it impossible to share information in conventional ways. So the hubs activate when communications are disrupted. If you're able to sit at home and keep your phone and your computer charged and tweet and text and call and search the internet for information, there's not a huge need for the hubs to stand up. But like Cindy said, in our area, we're looking at earthquakes that are very disruptive in the Puget Sound area. So, the slides just switched. I wonder if
And I
Cindy
have a
back.
funny feeling that that's because Ann doesn't even realize that she dropped. That Cindy doesn't realize that she dropped.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
Where do you need to be?
Actually, I think I can control the slides. Okay, so we'll keep going with this slide. So again, hubs don't activate until communications are down. So that's when we jump up. And our situation will be we take care of ourselves, control our utilities, blah, 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 in our own homes, and then we go out to the neighborhood and support our communities. So please, someone's getting hold of Cindy. So the hubs do two things. We collect and share information because theoretically, you won't be able to get much information from the community leaders, from the city, basically. So we collect and share information, and then we also match needs and resources. And Cindy would go into that quite a bit in the beginning when she talks more about the hub. So a hub is not a government agency. We are all volunteers. It is not an emergency shelter site. When we open up our little boxes of equipment, which you'll see in the slideshow, we do not pull out food and water and cots and tents and all that. We expect medical folks to present to the hub, and we'll figure out what to do with them, but we are not necessarily a first aid station. And like I said, we do not store food and water. We actually will ask people not to bring donations to us because we don't want to have to be responsible for dishing them out. So we will figure out where donations would be helpful. So these are just pictures of hubs that have been up and active, obviously not during a disaster, but this is just one of our practices. We try and practice, once or twice a year. Yeah, so just pictures, and every hub's a little bit different. They're all kind of unique. We're getting closer to being a little more streamlined and operating the same way, but these are truly grassroots organizations, and they have sprung up very, very organically. So I'm going to keep going with the slides. So hubs are a little bit about gear and a lot about organized neighbors. So this is a couple pictures of the box. The bottom right picture is a typical box. So they're not huge. They're 4 foot wide, like 2-3 feet tall. And the picture on the top left with the, it's folding table, a lot of whiteboards, some chairs. It's a lot about signage and communicating. There's some gear in there for like light search and rescue. So that's kind of what's in the box. This is a very typical hub box. No one size fits all. Every hub will be different. Their signage looks different. How they organize information will be a little bit different. But we have just recently put together a manual for those that want to use it, kind of standard job descriptions for what the hub manager would do, what the education officer would do. So we are trying to standardize if folks want to. And then every hub's a little bit different because of the community it's in. What are the languages that they need to incorporate? What is their population going to need? Different if you have a lot of high rises around you versus a lot of individual homes, that kind of stuff. Ham radio operators. So in the city of Seattle, we have the Auxiliary Communication Services, the ACS, ham radio operators who have been background checked and are trained with the city to respond after a disaster. Well, some of those ham radio operators, hopefully there'll be so many, the city can't use them all, and they can come to the hubs, come to their local hub and help out, especially if they can't physically get into the city or get to wherever the city wants them to go. So we work very closely with ham radio operators in our area to communicate between hubs and also with the city. So we do a lot of our exercises, including ham radio operators and figuring out how to exchange information between hubs and with the city. And then, like Cindy put on the slide here, sneakers is really important. We try to engage, like Boy Scouts are really a great resource and have a lot of fun with this, where we just give them a note and tell them to go somewhere. The nursing home that's 6 blocks away, can you run up there and find out how they're doing? These are the questions we want you to get answered, on your way back. So a lot of communication with the ham radio operators. And then our particular hubs are doing a lot with GMRS radio, which is not as strong as ham radio, but is very, very effective for our needs, just communicating within the communities themselves and maybe across communities if they're close enough. So we do use GMRS radio as well. And then when do we activate? For us, again, it would be a major earthquake or even a winter storm if communications have failed. And then we typically are not planning on activating at night. We will, hopefully, if everyone has a place to sleep for the night, we will shut it down and start back up the next morning. So we are not set up with power in our emergency hubs. We do not have, lights that are going to run all night long. We don't have generators, anything like that. So typically we shut down at night. And then, like I said before, you only come out if your family is okay and you're able to help others. We don't, this isn't a self-sacrificing kind of thing. And then, what does it look like? The general concept, and we'll just show you some snapshots of when we exercise.
And do you want to pause a minute just to ask if Cindy's on the line?
Yes, that's a great idea.
Cindy, were you able to join us back on the phone line? Okay, doesn't seem that that she's with us right now. So please continue.
Okay. Okay, so the parts of the hub. So we'll go down the information side first. So we have designed the hubs as a really good place for folks to come and get information, either to share information they have or to learn information that we have garnered from other sources. We believe that after a disaster, when information is not forthcoming because, everybody is just trying to figure out what's going on, that being able to walk up to a hub and see people that look like they know what they're doing. We're wearing orange vests. Some of us have hard hats on. We have name tags or lanyards around our neck, and we look organized. We believe the stress level of our communities will go down because somebody looks like they know what they're doing. So the three areas we have where folks can get information. Number one is the education area. I think maybe we have Cindy back on.
Holy moly.
Cindy,
all right.
I barely
Anna's been doing a wonderful job, Cindy.
Well, she's a pro at this too. Go ahead and finish the slide where you're on, Ann, and then I'll pick up.
Okay. The education area, we have designed 5 different posters. They are printed fairly large format for most of our hubs, 2 foot by 3 foot or even quite a bit larger. And they are information that we think folks will need after a disaster that, and they can just come up to the poster, they can read, they can take their time absorbing it, they can take pictures, they can take notes, so they can take that information back to their neighbors. And then the next.
So I'll take over here because I actually have pictures of all those.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so we are going to walk down, like Ann started, we're going to walk down the information side first, and then we're going to walk down the action side first. And then the next slide that I've got is that the people that show up in here, those are the volunteers who actually run each of those different areas. And so we're going to go down through each one of these and talk about what you do, just like Ann was starting to describe. So at the very beginning, what we've established is a person who is a greeter, and they're the entry point, and they're the person who kind of does the triage. Are you here just for information? Do you have a need? Are you here to volunteer? And they point them out to the different parts of the hub. When we have something that needs to be put on a form, like I'm looking for someone, here's their description, we have someone who helps people fill out those forms. And if we are very busy, which we've done in exercises, we might hand that form to someone and say, can you please fill it out? But we've learned you want to make sure people do a kind of check. You can first read their handwriting, and they provided all the information that it's going to make us possible to do what they're asking. So Ann was starting to talk about this self-help and education area. So this is what it would look like. It's a place where I'm just trying to figure out my toilet isn't working anymore. What do I do? And so we created, like she talked about, created these posters that are full of the information that you need after a disaster. And we thought about, there's a certain percentage of people who are not prepared, will not prepare, wanted to prepare but didn't get around to it, but now they need to know, how do you sterilize your water? How do you make a, pee and poo bucket? How do I communicate with people when all the internet's down? So all the tips that we can put on these posters, and hopefully what people will do is take notes, or if their cell phone's still working, take a picture and take it back to their neighborhood and share this information. In the community information area, so and the other part Ann was talking about also is, it's not just what's on the poster. We've created kind of here's how you make a mask for, should Mount St. Helens go again and we have a lot of ash, here's how you can make masks impromptu. Or other disasters that might befall us, there's an information book about how to kind of MacGyver your way out of the problems. In this community information area, this is where we start putting what information we are hearing from the city via either ham radio, or we're hearing from citizens who come and say, hey, I just tried to get to the hospital, but you can't go down First Avenue, and so take this route to get to where you need to go. So it's collecting all the information that we are seeing and hearing and posting it for our local area. One of the things we know in a very large regional kind of metropolis like Seattle is the major radio stations are going to cover where the biggest disaster piece has happened. And so if we have a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, they're going to be out on the coast, or they're going to be talking about downtown where maybe all the damage is. And out in your little neighborhood, you're not going to hear that. You're just going to hear over and over again which hospitals are overwhelmed. So this is the information that helps people make decisions about how do they get to their mother in another part of the city? How do they boil the water? What is it the city is also recommending that they need to do? Has there been a curfew established? So those sort of things. The other way to show information is just by using maps. So the map that's on the left is a laminated map of Seattle, and then hubs usually have their own, on the right-hand side, a much more local map so that we can show what roads are open or closed, or you can show where a shelter is open. So it's just an easier way to pass information on so that people can come up to the map and quickly get what they're looking for. We have one area, one area of the hub is a unstaffed area, or at least minimally staffed, and that's where people can put their own messages themselves, like I'm looking for a lost pet. I don't have to match up resources for that, but people can put who they, like we're helping somebody down the block, please come if you know Mrs. Olson. Excuse me. So it's kind of like self-run, and then we just have someone go by it every once in a while and just make sure that if anything is really outdated, it's pulled off. So next we're going to move to the right-hand side of that hub flow that was going on, and this is where kind of the action happens. So if you've got people who, these are the four kind of general topics we thought we would end up doing matching for. If somebody wants to offer food and water, or somebody needs a shelter, so these divide up our areas and can get people more quickly to what it is they're looking for or wanting to do. So you can see we also have the top 12 languages in Seattle, so that we tried to use universal communication, like Apple Water, it's pretty hopefully visually quick on what you can do. And so those go up into these kinds of, and you can see that each of these areas is a place where we're starting to sort out who's offering food, who's found where water is. Medical, who knows what pharmacies have opened, and what are their hours, and do you have to do anything like bring your pill bottle with you, or do you bring cash only? And so that way people can start coming up and getting the specifics that they need that are different than kind of general community information. And you can see these are pictures from 3 different hubs. Everybody's got something different. The folks over on the left-hand side, they don't have any walls. They're in a park. And so they had to invent these little holders out of an ambulance, carrier. And so they just put plastic across the front and formed a window so that they can categorize the needs and requests. The next one, their hub is next to a building, and so they're just taping it right up on the wall. So each of them handles it differently, and there's definitely a person who needs to be facilitating the matching of the needs and resources. Volunteers is really a big thing. I mean, when you look at that picture, there's 9 people. If you were running a full hub and you had it perfectly staffed, you'd have 9 people doing stuff. And so we need people, one shift will wipe out, a good part of your group. And if you're running 2 shifts, 24/7, we're going to need to ask the community to help come in and staff the hubs. And the other part that's around volunteers is we know that sorry, my whole screen keeps changing. We know that the community will want to help, and there's doctors and nurses and veterinarians and people with medical training who could help, and so they might show up at a hub, and you might end up setting up a whole medical area if the hospital is not accessible. In West Seattle, we're cut off from a hospital by either a 30-minute drive, we have to go south, but all the major Seattle hospitals are across a river, and we don't expect the bridges across that. We have 2 major bridges. We don't expect those bridges to be intact, and so there's some quick triage that's going to be needed. So the volunteer intake area has got 2 things. One, it's got a place where we can just tell people, here are some immediate things that you can do. You don't need to sign in. Go check with your neighbors. Go do different things around community level help. And then if you can still stay and help, here we're going to intake your information. What are your skills? What can you do? How can we plug you into this response? And we emphasize this over and over, and it's really important when you do field exercises that you involve the community, because as they go through a process of, how does this hub work and what are we doing, there are citizen actors and they go, oh, I see what you mean. I can translate. I was a scout. I know how to do, so there is a million skills that people have that we can offer. Hey, the church up the street has set up a shelter. They just need someone to keep the kids entertained. Hey, we need to have someone go up and help do security overnight, all those types of information. So it's hard to just plug someone in. So we learned a lot about just-in-time training. And when you get the community to say you can help at the hub, we created several tools so that we can quickly plug people in. Each one of those roles that I showed on the bigger slide has a job role assignment, and Anne was instrumental in creating these for us. It's got basically 2 pages of what are the essentials of the job, a little bit more description about, how you would do those, and if there's any forms or any aids that are associated with that job, they're right in that book. So these books are all in the or in our Hub in a Box or in the Hub Captain possession to be able to distribute. And we've gone through exercises where we do a shift change. So each volunteer says, okay, I'm going to get going home, and we go, great, here's your replacement. Greeter, go ahead and train this person, take 10 minutes and show them the ropes, hand them the book, watch them do it a couple times, and then you can go ahead and leave. So that is kind of like how our hub runs super fast. I will say that on our website, we have a YouTube channel, and we did a Hub 101 that kind of walks you through all that again for our pea patch gardeners. And so you can go to the YouTube channel and watch that again if you want. What we're going to talk about now is kind of like the additional parts of just being a hub and being a preparedness person in your neighborhood. Field exercises are so important because they really drive home to people why you talk to them about kits. When they see what it's going to be like to try and get food and water after a disaster, and, maybe it's not showing up, it kind of drives that home to them. And it gets the conversation started. It gets you potential volunteers. I know if I've gotten people to engage in the field exercise as a community actor, that when the real thing happens, they will show up and they're about 50% trained. So I've got kind of a standing staff already if I had 50 people helping me with an exercise. We do workshops. We do in-person Hub 101 training like you could see on the video. COVID has sort of set us all back on doing that. But, you know, we're still trying to figure out how to do some of the things virtually. After each field exercise, you end up working out kinks. You always find something that didn't work quite like you expected. So we do tabletop exercises. We've done recently this year, we had to kind of update our books with what do you do in a pandemic. So that was a good exercise for everybody. You got to walk through how you would operate a hub in a safe manner. We run monthly meetings where we do deep dives to actually create kind of either whether it's a culture of thinking about a best practice or an actual product. We did an appendix to our Hub Captain books that really deep dive into the question of safe water, sewer issues, and then waste removal off the streets. You know, what do we talk to citizens about? How do we get them prepared? And then we try to think through gaps that might occur. We know that the city of Seattle, they'll be setting up shelters, but they're not going to be on day one when we need people to be out of the Seattle rain. And so we try to think about how we could fill gaps, and we do those kind of exercises, all three of these with our local jurisdictions, so that we make sure we get their best practices and their subject matter expert thinking incorporated into what we do. We also, just to keep people, the Hub Captains engaged, we have every other month Hub Captain meetings where we cover topics, we have guest speakers, and we get to do an around the room so every hub gets to learn what another hub is doing. And that creates a lot of energy in how people are doing outreach, how they're working with their communities. We have so many people creative in our communities that they should be able to share those ideas. We also have an email list that all Hub Captains, it's an enrolled email list so that Hub Captains can just talk to each other. We created a Google Drive where all our documentation goes so that, you know, if somebody's wanting to do, you'll see some of the tabletops and workshops and training we do, so that that content is available for people if they want to do a local training. We ended up with a Zoom account that we lend out to everybody. We use them for the Hub Captains meetings. We'd actually started that before COVID. And then when local hubs want, now in COVID, when they want to meet and do something, everybody can use the Zoom account. And we've been recording our meetings, especially our deep dives, and posting them on the YouTube channel for the Hub Captains who just can't attend in person. So sometimes COVID has given us some better best practices than we had. I didn't want to pull up 2020's training activities because they're not really representative, but this is the sort of stuff that we do. We had one citywide exercise where, well, we have 150 hubs. We probably have 50 of them that practice super regularly and attend all the meetings. And then when we do citywide exercises, we really focus down and we do about 12 to 15 hubs throughout the city. And if your hub isn't activating and participating in the training exercise, you go to it, one of the ones that's participating, so everybody can play, and we just don't make it a giant exercise that we all learn together. And then you can see some of the topics of what we do. Anne also was one of the instrumental people in creating a thing called Urban Survival Skills. And that's where we have, you know, up to 15 tables where people can walk through each of the tables and learn a specific skill around, is it how to use communication apps, you know, how to create a pee and poo bucket, how to sanitize your water, how to, you know, get home safely, you know, how to build a get home bag. We do, and then hubs do their own little mini drills, so that happens all through the year. And then the one big thing we did in 2019 that was across all hubs was we worked with the Red Cross and we adapted their psychological first aid for responders course into a focus around the hubs, because when you take a Red Cross class, it presumes you're in a shelter, you've got professional staff, you've got psychologists and professionals on hand, and we had to say, well, we really aren't going to have that, but we're going to have some stressed out people. Let's talk about what you do in a field. And then the last piece I want to talk about is engaging your whole community. So FEMA's been talking about this for several years, and in Seattle we have a hugely diverse community across, and it's in pockets, it's across the whole city, and each hub captain needs to understand, because we're not all social animals where you know your a community in Seattle, a neighborhood in Seattle is between 5,000 and 11,000 people. And so my hub is about 7,000 people, and just to go, well, I know who I see at the grocery store, but, you know, I'm not really seeing everybody. So we did a deep dive on how to get community demographics so you understand who is in your community, so you can start to see if you need languages that you're going to really want to get translators, pulled into your hub as quickly as possible. Or is your community got some really economic stresses on it, and food and water might be one of your top priorities. So to do that, after you get the demographics, then we started working our way towards making all of our materials more accessible, and that's in multiple dimensions, doing translations, working on our videos that are captioned, making our website be better and as accessible, and using better principles in doing that. And so we wrote a guidebook for doing whole community outreach, because in Seattle, you could go to the Office of Immigrant Affairs and get a really deep dive on their perspective, but you had to go to the Office of Seniors and Aging to get, what to do about hard of hearing, and then you had to go to the Department of Neighborhoods to get another perspective. And so what that guidebook does is just takes all those and puts them in one place so that we can think about doing outreach to people who are underrepresented at typical meetings. And that goes through the cultural, the language, the accessibility, and it walks a hub captain from what do you think about when you do your invitations to the venue, and how does the day of the event spool out for all those different dimensions, and then how do you follow up? And this is just kind of the table of contents. And I have not posted this on the website yet, because I'm going to do a test run class of it next week, and then eventually it'll get up there. We'll distribute it through our Google Drive, of course, to the hub captains, but I think I would make this available to everybody, even though the references are either Washington State or Seattle unique, but still just the concepts are still good. So that was, I wanted to leave at least 10 minutes for Q&A. That was like the speed job through the hubs. I have not seen anything focused on the questions or anything. So I'll turn it back to our facilitator to see how we want to do Q&A.
Yep, thank you so much. We will manage the questions. We have them all set aside, ready and waiting for you.
Okay.
So the first question is there a list of items that you go by for a hub box?
Yes, and I'm not sure it's on the website. I know it's in the Google Drive. I forgot to say, if you go to the website, there's a tab called Resources, and under that tab is almost all the stuff I've talked about, how to start a new hub, the posters, any of the tools we've got, the job boxes, and I don't think the hub in the box list is on there, and I'm writing that down to put it up there.
Right. So do you want to share some of those items with us now?
It's really communications gear. It is, the tent shelter, the tables, the chairs, the forms, the books of how to do stuff, and a lot of writing material and Post-its. So that's kind of like, I laugh, we've always heard the FEMA form number 1, blank piece of paper and a pencil. You can run a hub with that if you had to. So beyond that is just what, flashlights, and, if you had to do it at night, a solar powered lantern or a crank lantern, some logical things. But you could stuff a whole room full of stuff. That's why we limited ourselves to the box.
During COVID, have virtual hubs been established or activated for those areas that have internet and power?
Well, we had a moment of what are we going to do when COVID came, because we had never intended to respond in a pandemic. We are really the all communications out hub. But we have so many community leaders who know what to do that several of the hubs establish what's called a mutual aid network. We patterned it off a nearby neighborhood called Bainbridge Response, and I cannot remember the people who created the recovers.org nonprofit, but they make available to people an online aid network, and if you go to recovers.org, there's a map, and you can click on different parts of the city that do that. They stood it up for after hurricanes or after a tornado, so that's kind of the virtual model, but because COVID is not responding and helping your neighbor in some way, we didn't stand up the hubs, but most of us all got engaged in our local neighborhood to help people find and connect to resources during those first days of shortages and information needs.
Are there certs in Seattle, and how do the Cert teams collaborate with the hubs?
Well, that's very frustrating for us in the hubs. There are not Cert teams. The city did them a long time ago, and for various reasons, and a lot of it's administrative, they have declined to sponsor CERT. And so we have to explain that to people and say, so, the search and rescue type functions are not going to be here, and so that's why we are just helping ourselves. The city emphasizes, like I said before, that Seattle Neighbors Actively Prepare, which is more around connect and train with your neighborhood, with your block level. Be prepared to respond at your block level, but they don't do the formal CERT training.
Gotcha. I want to make sure, I think I'm reading this correctly, besides ham radio, or have you considered other communications like ham radio, FRS, and GMRS?
Yeah, I actually didn't go into that. We have a GRMS repeater system that's been set up by our volunteers here in the city of Seattle, and the city helps us maintain it. We moved them from people's rooftops to actual generator backed up antenna towers with the help of the Auxiliary Communication Service volunteers of the city of Seattle. And so we have 4 repeater channels across the city, and each sector of the city has a primary assignment, and then you have and if the repeater goes down, switch to this channel. FRS we encourage the neighbors to use because in Seattle we have a lot of hills and it really screws up our line of sight. That's why we even had to go to repeaters. So all our hub captains have a license, and we practice Mondays. We have a net check-in for GRMS, and then the ACS team is a very strong team. They've got their own website, and they're the ham radio experts, exploring even using digital as a method of getting situation reports up into the city.
Thank you. Do you think you could touch a little bit on some of the challenges and suggestions for building a communications hub in a rural area?
I went and visited my cousins in New Mexico, and I was thinking about how I was going to explain, what we do in Seattle, because from what I know in my family, this is all natural to those small rural neighborhoods. This is what you do. And so it's really formalizing it and, going through we all get together, we all help each other. The trick to all these, whether you're rural or urban, is you have to sustain it. Citizens get so tired of jurisdictions that come in with the program of the year and, they do it, they get all involved, and then the politics change, the volunteer coordinator moves on, and things drop again. So that's why we try to ingrain this in this is your community, take care of your community, be prepared to do this, and then you support them by encouraging them to do exercises, so that they don't get bored and they go, hey, they've forgotten about us. Nobody's talking to us about this. So rural is the easiest place to me to do it. You're just a little more spread out, but that mentality is there, and you just have to, for the emergency manager, you just have to sustain it.
Okay. With your ham operators, how do you manage message traffic that requires either precision or if such length that the message has a high probability for transcription error?
We do yearly practices. There's a thing out here in Seattle called the Communications Academy where it's all focused around communications during emergencies. I think it's called comacademy.org. I hate to tell people that because they got 1,000 people signed up already, but that is going to happen in April. The big move has been to FLDigi, HamWAN, and I forget the third one, which is for those long messages, you just transcribe. It used to be called packet radio. You transcribe them over the radio airwaves. And HamWAN allows you to establish internet node connection over the airwaves. So that is a really big move out here in Seattle so that we can stop with the handwritten messages and transfer big chunks of information digitally, although we never will step away from voice only because when you watch the guys do the exercises, they're fraught with technical issues. And so don't lose voice, but definitely explore those other options.
Okay.
Yeah, WinLink. Thank you.
Are you willing to share your manual and shelter-in-place posters?
Oh, yeah, they're on the website. You can download them. They're all PDFs.
Great.
So go to the resources tabs and then setting up a hub, I think it's all under.
Okay. How do you take the information and make it visual relevant to the area? For example, mapping. Do you use an offline map for saving the data? How is your data shared with others?
Well, in Seattle we live in a high technical area, and so everybody goes, this analog stuff of having a printed laminated map and, having to post it just doesn't work. So, I think that on day 3 of a disaster, the maps that we have stored in the hub boxes will be harder and harder to update, and we'll get some of these tech people out in the field with their laptops and their solar rechargers, and we'll start doing stuff online, especially the matching part of it. But we don't really practice that. We just need to get day 1 through 3 covered, because hopefully by then the city government is starting to get more information out, and the real shelters are opening, and CPODs are being set up. We're just trying to hold it together for, we hope 3 days, but, realistically it's more like a week. So you're going to invent as you go along, but we start with the analog version.
Okay.
Oh, insurance. I want to answer that. So in Washington, we do not have a Good Samaritan law that covers anything except medical. So we sponsored a bill in the state legislature to extend Good Samaritan response to be non-medical, specifically in times of disaster. And it's in the Senate right now, so it might make it through.
I feel like you probably answered this, but how can we access similar organizational resources that Seattle has used to build our own community communications and information hub?
I'm not sure I understand that. I mean, we were all, what happened in Seattle was there was an existing network of community leaders because we did a thing called neighborhood planning, and our Department of Neighborhoods really encouraged, neighborhood organizations to work. So that was kind of like the natural plug-in we had about talking about hubs, and, anybody who heard about the hubs and were interested, we'd go to the community groups and do that. That did not get us into all places that maybe we should have, and we're now learning, to partner with community-based organizations, the faith-based organizations, that, it's harder to do that with them because they have such important missions as their primary thing, and it's hard for them to really pay attention to the emergency preparedness. So we're trying to figure out how we do that partnering, and actually so is the city of Seattle.
Gotcha. When you were talking about tents and tables and chairs, where is all this stuff kept, this hub box? Who keeps that and where?
I probably whizzed past the pictures, and that was when I was having my technical problems. They sit in the parks. Most of our hubs are in parks. There's a couple in churches. The ones in the churches sit by the side of the building, and they're just those gray boxes that in a park look like they hold, football chalk and sporting equipment. So for a long time, we had years where nobody even bothered them. They weren't being graffitied or anything. Lately, it's been a little more challenging. We've had an entire hub box get up and walk away, so we've learned, concrete that sucker into the ground. But we only start with just enough to get things going, and then you turn to the community and say, bring me more tables, bring me more chairs.
At the time of the incident.
Yeah, you will have so many people who want to help. We see that over and over in every disaster. So let's use them. They may not think they can do anything else, but if they can give you a sheet of plywood to write on, great.
Okay. How do you go about determining the size of your hub area?
What actually happens is when people find out about this in a neighborhood that doesn't have one, they say, well, we'll set one up, and you really end up going, well, it's probably the people who live about 15 minutes around you who are going to walk to your hub. So we didn't make any real effort to, carefully place these, because you have to have the Energizer Bunny who's going to run this and sustain this. And so it's always a connection between a point person and a community group or that church or that faith-based organization that says, and we will sustain this. And so if you look at our hub map on our website, they're just kind of randomly scattered, because if you try and force people to do a hub, those were the hubs that will die.
Point taken. What would be a suggestion, if you have any, for integrating the hub with a volunteer reception center?
If you had a volunteer reception center set, like let's say the city of Seattle sets one up, man, I'm sending all my volunteers to them, right? And then saying, and you make sure you get volunteers back to me. Anything the city does is what we stop doing, because we're not professionals at this. We're just trying to hold it together. And so, as soon as a real shelter is set up, if it's anything that it makes sense for the local people to go to, send them there. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Are the hubs always in the same place? How do you folks know where they are located, and are they on a map?
Yes, they're on a map, also on our website. We have an interactive map so that you can click on it and get the contact information for each hub captain, because first we're trying to make sure people know their local hub, not just to where they live, but to where they work, right? Because you could be stuck at work and you can't get home in Seattle, and so go to a hub and help, or go to a hub and find out how you get over that river that the bridge isn't working on anymore. And say the question again.
Are they always in the same place?
Yeah.
How do folks know where they're located? Are they?
Yeah, right. On the map we do all the outreach to say find these ahead of time, but we also say we've done our best to place these where there are no hazards, but we have to always kind of look at that and go, well, we're in a liquefaction zone because we can't help it, because that's where our neighborhood is. So if you come down here and you don't see us, look for signs, because maybe we've moved 2 blocks away. Or better yet, the aftershocks have stopped and I'm moving into the building a block down. Definitely we tell people this is our plan, but be prepared for the plan to change.
So are they mostly outside? What do you guys do if the weather is bad?
Well, that's the problem. They're all outside because we think, we're in the earthquake country, so you can't presume that you can even get to your gear if the building is damaged. So, yeah, it's why we have one shelter tent. It's going to be crappy if it's a rainy day. And if it happens in the rare snows we get, we're going to be so miserable, but that's the reality. As soon as you figure out that you can move, like many of our hubs say, we're going to meet on the plaza outside neighborhood house. But as soon as you can get the building unlocked and get in and believe it's going to be safe, we're all going to try and move inside.
Okay. Does your hub have a PIO, Public Information Officer, and do you get media inquiries?
There's a couple of the hub captains who have said we kind of split Seattle up into first north and south. So I take care of a lot of the stuff in South Seattle, and Ann takes care of north. So sometimes media inquiries just go right to them. And then we also have hub captains in the sectors. We have 7 sectors in the city. And if it's a local question, we point them to them.
Great.
Cindy, if I can step in just a second.
Yeah.
The PIOs are really important when we're doing drills, public information officers, because folks will come up and they want to chat about what they're seeing, and you can't really practice the hub drill while you're explaining to everybody, to the public, what it is. So we do have PIOs really, really faithfully during drills to handle the questions from the public about what's going on. But during an activation, we would not necessarily need a PIO. Everybody that's there needs to step in and help out, not just stand around and find out what's going on.
Okay. I see a question I want to ask. I didn't mention this at all about funding for the hubs. When we started this, it was really just it's part of being part of your community. And so most of the hub captains for the first 10 years, we paid for everything out of our pocket. Or sometimes a community council would sponsor something, or the Hub in the Boxes, we wrote a grant request of the City of Seattle. Our departments and neighborhoods has a fantastic program where community groups can apply for funding. So that's how we got a lot of the first parts of things funded for, but like I said, we're not a nonprofit, so we can't collect, contributions. And this year we finally said, getting tired of paying for the website and, printing costs and a couple of things out of our pocket. So we did a GoFundMe, and our target was, we thought 2 years of funding for $5,500, and we got $6,000 and said, good enough, and we cut it off. So you can do this with community creativity. It helps people get engaged. It helps, it's a little bit of a challenge, but if you are a jurisdiction who has money, this is not really expensive. You just have to manage your volunteers wisely.
Understood. With that, I'd like to thank you both, Cindy and Ann, for sharing this information with us. It is a great resource for any community to have, and we appreciate you sharing all the bumps that you guys have hit along the way. If others could learn from that and avoid some of those bumps, we truly appreciate it. Today's presentation is in the download pod. If folks would like to get a copy of it, it's in a PDF format. And Allison has moved the poll onto the screen. It's just 3 very short questions that help us drive programming for future webinars. We do have a number of webinars coming up, including one on ham radio and how it's used in several counties in Florida, actually pretty much statewide. I think it'll be very interesting to hear. Region 2 has been integral in developing additional guides for expanding mitigation to communities and areas where you wouldn't ordinarily think of. So those have been very well received nationally. If you want to join us for those, we will be doing an overview in March, and then beginning in April and every month for the rest of the year, we will be going through one of the guides at lunchtime, I believe, the first Wednesday of every month, but I might be lying. So if I am, you can click on the first link on the slide that's on your screen. All of our upcoming webinars are posted there. Today's webinar and all our previous webinars can be found by clicking the recordings link. If you don't already get FEMA Region 2 news, click our subscribe button. And if you have any comments or suggestions for future topics, if there's a gap that we're missing that you think needs to be addressed, we would certainly be happy to entertain the idea. Last year we did end up delivering 110 webinars. This is the new normal, people. So any way that we can help bring subject matter experts to you, especially as it pertains to preparedness and building resilience, we're happy to do so. It's 1 p.m. Thank you to all our participants for joining us today, and thank you to our speakers for an excellent presentation. Everybody have a great day. You're free to